Welcome, beautiful friends. We are so excited for you to join us at the table today as we savor God's goodness. Our hope is that you will be encouraged, challenged, and entertained as you listen to Stacy and friends dig into God's Word. We encourage you to invite a friend to listen with to taste and see God's goodness because we are all about community and good food here at Savor.
Welcome to another episode of the Savor podcast. We are so thrilled that you are joining us. We are over the moon about this episode. Elizabeth and I had the opportunity to invite Mary Marantz to sit at the table with us. She is an author and a speaker, and she was sharing with us about her new book, Underestimated. If you're a woman who is listening and you have been playing it small, you have been afraid to move forward, you feel stuck, you feel overwhelmed, and you are just paralyzed with fear, or you overthink everything, or you procrastinate and put things off to the last minute, then you are not going to want to miss out on this episode. So go pour yourself a hot cup of coffee, a hot tea, or go for a nice long walk, settle in and be encouraged as you listen to us talk to Mary and listen to her share with us all about her new book, Underestimated. Well, Mary, it's so great to have you at the table.
Yes.
Welcome to the Savor table. We're so glad you could join us today.
Stacy and Elizabeth, thank you so much for having me. I do feel like I'm right there at the table with you guys. Like, we got to talk a little bit before we hit record, and I feel like I'm just right there in your kitchen, and we're going to go downtown and do a little shopping after this.
Yeah,
Rainbow Row.
fabulous restaurant and go shopping. Yeah, let's go.
That's
Nice.
right. That's right. Well, Mary, tell us a little bit about you. We'd love to hear a little bit about who you are and kind of what your background is, and maybe a little bit about where you grew up and how that's impacted where you are today.
Yeah, so for everybody listening and you're meeting me for the very first time, the sort of elevator pitch version of my life is that I grew up in a single wide trailer in very rural West Virginia on the top of a mountain called Fenwick Mountain. And, my dad's a logger, his dad was a logger, his dad's dad was a logger, 8 generations deep. We have photos of our family in the 1800s logging with horses in the deep woods of West Virginia. And I always like to clarify when I say I grew up in a trailer that it was truly a single wide, very dilapidated kind of trailer. This is not your really nice double wide with a permanent foundation. It was basically a tin can, and surprising to no one, trailers made in the late 70s, early 1980s were not really built to last. I also have to tell you guys, I have to take some ownership over that fact because being kind of the children of the 80s that we were, these sort of feral cats who were, left to fend for ourselves, we would actually climb up. So the thing to do with a single wide trailer in the 80s in rural West Virginia is we would build on like a lean-to shack of a one-room bonus edition with whatever wood was hanging out in the yard, basically. And we would, as kids, use that sort of overhang from the lean-to addition to pull ourselves up on that and then hoist ourselves up on top of the trailer in the rain and use it as the most painful slip and slide you can imagine. With just like all the rivets every few feet. And surprising to no one, the roof started to leak and then the ceiling caved in and then the water poured through, so the floor started to cave in. And my dad's logging boots would, cake mud into the brown shag carpeting, and we had stray animals who would go inside as much as they would go outside, so that was in the carpeting. We had mushrooms growing out of the carpeting at one point. And so it was a very, just when you think like very rural Appalachian single wide trailer, basically it checks every box. And then you fast forward to my story and I end up at Yale for law school, which is quite the whiplash kind of adjustment. And I feel like on one hand, that's not an outcome we expect from somebody who grew up in a trailer in rural West Virginia. But on the other hand, that's an underdog trope we're very familiar with. This humble beginnings to the Ivy League, or humble beginnings to sports stardom, or humble beginnings to some sort of astronomical success. Rory McIlroy just won the Masters, and the whole story, the whole narrative is how he grew up really humbly in Northern Ireland, and his parents worked multiple jobs so that their one child could chase a dream. And so we love an underdog story, especially in our country. I feel like we really love rooting for the unlikely hero. And it's very tempting as somebody who's an underdog character I say in Underestimated, that is the role of the lifetime. And what I mean by that is if we're not careful, we could spend our whole lives playing that part. And so what does it look like for us to move beyond constantly trying to prove people wrong, constantly trying to show other people how far we've come, and instead show up in true significance and true purpose to do the good work that was prepared for us in advance. So I feel like I've spent 45 years preparing to write this book, is what I'm telling you.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. And the book you're referring to is your new book that's coming out called Underestimated.
That's right.
Yes. And funny story, we talked about this a little bit before we hit record. Underestimated is not your first book, it's your third book. Is that correct? It's your third
That's
book.
right. Yeah, third book in 5 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
Oh my gosh.
So your first book was Dirt.
Mm.
Yes. And funny story is before I even knew who you were or knew anything about it years ago, I was, doing some research and I used Logos Bible software and I was reading and studying and preparing for a women's event where I was going to be teaching about hope and renewal and overcoming. And I came across your book, Dirt, in the library of Logos. And I was like, I have to buy that book right now. And I bought it and I read it and I used it, some of the stories out of there for examples in teaching with those women. So then
Isn't that a small world?
I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
I was
Isn't
like,
that funny?
that is crazy.
Yeah.
That to me is like just the providence of God working. Years ago, he knew when I was studying and reading that one day I'd have the opportunity to actually interview you. And I'm like, this is like it's a full circle moment for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
very
love that.
yes. So your new book, Underestimated, in that book, I love it because you talk about making simple shifts from stuck to start. And one of the things I think that I have heard a lot of times when I am talking with women and kind of trying to help women is they feel stuck. And so I would love for you to share with us today, for maybe the woman who's listening, she may feel overwhelmed. That's another word I hear a lot, that women feel overwhelmed and stuck in life. And so for that woman listening today, what's a piece of advice or something that you would share with her that would help her take that simple shift from being stuck to starting?
Yeah. Well, I think like right there, even the question sets up part of the answer in the form of I really want us to hang out on those words, moving from stuck to start, because I think it can feel very tempting to fall into this trap of very all or nothing thinking. That's one of the very first names of fear I discussed that comes up even in chapter 1, which is called starting over is a rolling boulder. So to catch everybody up who's listening and at home, Underestimated is based on the idea that fear is a really boring liar. And when you really get right down to it, he only has a handful of broken scripts he uses on all of us and a handful of masks that he puts on. And so every chapter by chapter is a different face or name of fear that I go toe to toe with, like boxing ring, 14 rounds I don't know if they go to 14 rounds ever in boxing, but we do in this book of, toe to toe battle with fear. And, when we're sort of talking about this idea of moving from stuck to start, it can become very tempting to think in that all or nothing way. So chapter 1 is starting over as a rolling boulder, to go, well, if I can't do it all and I can't do it all perfectly today, then I should just wait to start. If I can't just sit down and write the entire book start to finish in one weekend, then I should wait until a weekend when I can. And we're very, very uncomfortable with things that happen small degrees at a time. We're very, very uncomfortable with things. It sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like that would actually feel more comfortable. But the truth is we think we have to kind of like buckle up all our courage and do it in one weekend, or we're not going to be able to do it at all. And this idea of doing it over and over and over for very small rewards or efforts or proof of doing the work, there's not a lot to show for it in the beginning. And so it feels very tempting to give up. So anyway, I'm saying all of that because on the very earliest version of this cover for Underestimated, in the final cover, as I'm holding up here, I know that like you can see it, Stacy and Elizabeth, everyone else is just going to listen to me describe it. It has a giant compass on the front, and if you look behind the compass, there's actually 2 X marks the spots and a dotted line, kind of twisting, dotting line between them. And on one of the earlier cover mock-ups I did for the book, because I have a lot of opinions, and so I'm like, I'm going to do mock-ups of what I see for this cover. It was more of like a straight across sort of dotted line, and on one side it said A, and on the other side it said B. And my editor, Kelsey, said, at first I didn't get that. I thought, why is it not A to Z? Like, we're going to do the whole journey. And then she realized that, like, some of the most important work of doing any of this is just being willing to take that first step.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to move you from stuck to finish. That's a different phase of the process. Right now, I'm just focused on getting you to move from stuck to start.
Mm-hmm.
And so the subtitle of the book is The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. And there's a sort of a lot that goes into setting up the answer, but it really boils down to, in chapter 3, we have self-sabotage is a shot glass. And it's talking about how when we think we only have a very small amount of capacity, like shot glass size, the book is not about alcohol at all. The chapter's not about alcohol at all. But when we think we only have the capacity of a shot glass, then anytime we feel like we're being asked to do more or be trusted with more or have more exposure, we will subconsciously shrink back down until we can fit into the tiny containers we believe we belong in. And right after I'd seen that graphic that said that, it was on a very sort of cheesy success account that I follow for a guilty pleasure. I had Dr. Allison Cook on my podcast, The Mary Marantz Show, and I asked her about it, and I said, how do we stop doing that if we don't even know we're doing it most of the time, if it's subconscious? And she said, we can actually, if we grew up with like some chaos or some instability in our story, we sort of flipped into survival mode, we don't know how to shift back out of it, we constantly keep shrinking back down, we constantly keep returning to chaos because that's what feels safe and familiar, we can begin to expand our capacity by setting small, so manageable, but important, they have to matter to us, commitments to ourselves and actually keeping them. And she looked me right in the eye through the screen and she said, Mary, as you do that, you are teaching yourself there's a grown-up in the room who can be trusted. That grown-up is you. And so really the small shift to move from stuck to start is about setting small but important commitments to yourself and proving to yourself you're doing it. You're doing the work and you can be trusted to move forward into the dream, into the work you feel like you've been put here to do. You are expanding your capacity to steward that well. So that's really what it boils down to. And then every chapter is sort of like, what is that small shift for each face of fear? There's a lot of information. And believe me, it was actually the condensed version. It could be a 47-hour answer. But it's really, when we're talking about shifting away from fear, I think as Christians, we get really uncomfortable with phrases like self-trust.
Yes.
Because we're like, I'm not putting my trust in myself. Like, my only trust is in God. And I want to draw a distinction between capital T trust, which is that kind of trust where our ultimate hope goes, and this little t trust that's about stewardship. Because not trusting ourselves to steward something well is how that third person with the talent ended up burying the gift that they'd been given. They were afraid of losing it or messing it up. And ironically, they end up having it taken away because they didn't trust themselves to steward it well.
Oh,
Wow.
that's so powerful.
Yeah, that
And I've
really
never
is.
really heard someone make that distinction before.
Mhm.
And I especially love it because you're speaking to me and Elizabeth into our heart.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
part of what we've been doing is working on launching Savor mentorship. So
Okay.
and launching it nationwide. We've been doing
Yeah.
it at our church for 10 years and
Okay.
felt the call by God to write this curriculum to make it accessible to churches all across the country. And we
Wow.
started that journey a couple of years ago. And it's really interesting that you made the distinction between capital T trust and little t trust and associating it with stewardship.
Yeah.
So every year our family has a word of the year. Last year was stewardship for us.
Wow.
And now that you're saying that, I'm like, oh, that's what you were doing, Lord. You were showing me to steward the resources that you have given me.
Mhm.
Because when you're talking about this, it resonates so much
Mhm.
of, yeah, I felt like we had to do it all. And it was just take that first simple, manageable step.
Yeah.
And that is amazing. And I agree. Like the idea of fear and the enemy, he doesn't have any new tactics. He's so boring.
Yeah.
And as a
Yes.
matter of fact, you say fear is a boring liar.
Yeah.
So you touched on that a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about that because I
Yeah.
think that's something that women I can get paralyzed in fear at times.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I may feel that way, but it really is a boring liar. So tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about what you mean when you say that in your book. I loved that phrase in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in addition to now being a full-time author and a podcast host, I also coach women who want to do those things. They want to have a book or a podcast, or they want to speak from the stage. And I had gone through like a season where I was having all these coaching calls with my clients, and they were all getting hit with like the same versions of fear at like the same time, and it was like the same stage in the process. Like they just made like a big step forward and moving forward on the dream, and it's like, and existential crisis, right on time. And I found fear attacking me in the same way. And so I just hopped on Instagram one day without any kind of introduction, really. And I was just like, it's all been done. It's all been done better. It's all been done by somebody the world actually wants to pay attention to. I can't start until it's perfect. I can't start until I am perfect. What if I start and the critics come? What if they say, who does she think she is? What if I don't have the blueprint? What if I don't know every step in the staircase? What if I think I said this one, don't have the bandwidth, can't stay consistent with it. What if my voice doesn't matter? What if I don't matter? What if it's already too late? And then I said, fear is not your friend. Start anyway. Start now. And it just sort of took off. People were like, yes, like that's all of them, basically. And it made me realize that it was just sort of an epiphany moment of like, oh, wow, like fear's not creative at all. And I feel like, I'm going to be honest with you, as you were asking the question, I had this, it's giving me like head to toe chills right now. This thing wash over me that was like, I feel like you two are going to get this answer in a way that no other show that I've been on yet is going to fully appreciate it. Because there's real depth there if we camp out in it for a second. Mm-hmm. The epiphany moment was fear. What if fear attacks creatives because it is jealous that it itself is not creative at all? Mm-hmm. And then normally right now I just sort of rattle off the line from the book, which is, it is not tethered to melody or muse or the original force of all creation. It has no inherent gifts of its own except for the ability to throw its voice to sound like you and to shapeshift its face, the mask that it puts on, so that it becomes this really tricky slippery enemy to grab hold of. But if we camp out there for a second and we think about the father of lies, we think about the enemy of our spirit, this force that doesn't want us to step into the role of being an image bearer of the ultimate creator. Mm. And we think, what is the opposite of light is darkness. What is the opposite of love? We could say hate, or it might be apathy. We could argue about that. What is the opposite of creation, right? If one of the main characteristics of God is being a creative force, a creator, mm-hmm. Then fear, as the opposite of that, would be lacking in that creativity. Mm-hmm. And I feel like as walking around the world as fear, as the enemy, as Satan, whatever you want to call it, just sort of, I just picture him kind of slinking around, like really mad that God is creative and humans are creative and he's not. And so he has to kind of take those of us who do have that creativity as part of our birthright. Mm-hmm. He wants to take us out, but he, being not creative, only ends up using the same boring scripts over and over again. And you go thousands of years into the Bible, he's using the same kind of lies that he's using on us right now. Did God really say that? Are you really equipped?
Yeah.
Are you sure you're supposed to step out right now? Are all the circumstances to begin perfect? And so, anyway, I just felt like that was maybe for somebody listening, or like that you two would get that in particular. Like, if we believe that this force of fear is the enemy, then he's the opposite of what we know of God. So he's the opposite of creative. And fear's not a very creative guy, but he is a very busy guy. He's got a lot of people to go, sabotage. And so he has learned, like any good productive overachiever, to prioritize. And so if you are already playing small or hiding in plain sight, fear is mostly going to leave you alone. A little self-sabotage or perfectionism sprinkled in, and you are all set. But show up and do work that actually matters. Mm-hmm. The good work that was prepared for you in advance, work that might actually help people and change lives, and God can actually act through you. He doesn't have to act through you, but he's asking to act through you. And he's asking to partner with you. And every day that you say no, first of all, it's the lack of obedience, but second of all, God doesn't get to delight in co-creating with you, right? So anywho, if you show up and actually start to do work like that, you better expect fear to arrive teeth bared and snarling.
Yeah, and I think this is so timely too, because we've been kind of cocooned in this little nest of the three of us just writing and creating and safe in that. And now the books are here and the conference is next week. And it's like, we're just at that cusp of getting it out there and putting it out in the world. And it's such a scary place to be. And you can just see the enemy just coming at all angles at all three of us and trying to trip us up and make us lose confidence. Nobody's going to buy this. Nobody's going to do this. It's just, you're going to have 1,200 books sitting in your bonus room for years or whatever. And so it's exactly what you said. is just that fear is just lurking and slinking around, and we just have to constantly battle that.
Yeah, I love that so much because that actually really gets to the heart of something I was just talking about. Right before I hopped on with you two, I recorded an episode for my podcast with my producer Elizabeth that will air on launch day. And she said, "Is there, before we go, is there like one line from the book that's really jumping out for you today for people to really hone in on?" And the one that came to me is, it's so weird how God works in these ways. It's so weird. The line that came to me was, "There is a specter of fear far more haunting than failure. It is the apparition of success."
Mm.
And it goes back to that quote, I believe, is actually in like chapter 10 or something like that, but it goes back to chapter 1 where it's talking about, the whole book has a running metaphor of pushing the boulder up the mountain over and over again, only to blink at the very last minute and we lose our grip and we lose our way and the boulder rolls back down the mountain. And there's this one really fun part that's like, you get to the top, you're almost at your breakthrough moment. You can taste the rarefied air. There's a small wooden stake sign in the ground that says arrived, and you are here to let you know how close you came this time. And then, like Wile E. Coyote about to get his comeuppance, you freeze when you make eye contact with everybody watching at home.
Yeah.
And for just 1 minute, suspended in time, we are the kind of people who defy gravity. But then we let this playing small push us right back over the edge. So that feeling you're describing is the same feeling I see on repeat in all the people I coach, in myself. It is this moment of like, oh, wait, people are actually going to look at this.
Yes.
I might actually have to
Yes.
be seen.
Yes.
I might actually have to take up space. They're gonna read this book. They're gonna hear me speak from the stage. They're gonna see these words. They're gonna listen to this episode. Just kidding. Just
Right.
kidding. And we lose our grip, we lose our way, and the boulder rolls back down the mountain. And so I actually think a lot of the fear that keeps us stuck the most is the fear of success. It's the fear of being seen.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
that is so good. I loved in the book that you had the visuals too. I'm
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
visual, so I appreciated that
For sure.
Yeah.
throughout the book too. A couple of times you have referred to one of my favorite verses, and you talk about the work that was prepared beforehand for us to do. And I think that's so important in light of this, that you said God's choosing to work through us. He doesn't need us,
That's right.
but he chooses to
Mhm.
work through us. And it is a step of obedience, having the opportunity to interview you and to, be able to talk about this new book, Underestimated, that you've got coming out. I think, oh my goodness, she must just feel like she's got it all together, and I'm like, I could never do that. I could never do that. So I think I appreciate the vulnerability of your heart in sharing that, hey, we all, and that's really kind of comes out a lot in Underestimated. You share a lot about that. And so
Yeah.
that's been really helpful to me as I read through the book and was just like, man, I'm so excited for it to be released and for other women to be able to
Yes.
get their hands on it.
Yeah, me too. We're at that place of like, let's get this party started.
Yeah.
We're like, as we record, we're about 11 days, I think, 10 or 11 days from it being out. And I'm definitely, it's kind of like when you're planning a wedding or something and you're just like, let's get the party started. We're ready. But yeah, so I've had people say to me in complete stone-faced seriousness, like, when was it in your story that you both stopped underestimating yourself and other people stopped underestimating you? Was it when you got into Yale? Was it when you signed your book deal? And I'm like, try this morning. As of this morning, somebody underestimated me and I underestimated myself. Like, it just, I now, and I don't know, I'd like to ask Oprah this. She's about the only exception I can think of, but even her probably not. Like, does it ever end? Do we ever stop having other people look right through us and not see us for what we are? And do we ever stop doing that to ourselves? And I haven't reached that point.
Yeah.
I'm not really hopeful I will. But I am finding ways to work through that, with that being in the room. One of my favorite lines in Underestimated talks about, when you encounter someone who's looking at you like you don't matter at all, they're looking as if they're looking over your shoulder at the next person behind you who actually matters. It's this script I tell myself, that's okay. You'll meet them later. Like when we add in the variable of time, I know where I'm headed. I know the work I'm going to go do. And they just need to catch up with the timeline.
Yeah. Because we serve a God of time. His timing
Yeah.
is perfect and it's ordained. And I think that's a really important factor to think about. That you're right. I love that. That it's just
Yeah, he's demonstrating that to us over and over in just these huge ways that I think he's like, okay, ladies, I need you to trust capital T and that I've got
Yeah.
you on this. But it's again, and one of the things you talk about too is overthinking. And
Yeah.
I can get caught in that hamster wheel of, well, is this, what about this? And what if this? And what if that? And what, you talk a little bit about that too, which I loved.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a section. So over chapter 7 is overthinking is an orange safety cone. And it kind of goes through a little bit of like the science of what's actually happening in our brains, why it's so exhausting to overthink. Turns out when we're really trying to think our way through a thinking problem, and I compare that to like if you've ever had writer's block so bad you feel like you're trying to sneeze through your forehead, right? Like all the existential angst in the world gets kind of pent up right there in your forehead. It's because you are overworking your prefrontal cortex. You are in the problem solving part of your brain trying to solve new problems with old ways of thinking, and it doesn't work. And it's like the more frustrated, I kind of compare the prefrontal cortex to like the red M&M with like little M&M gloves and white gloves, white boots, stomping its feet, John Lovett style, having a temper tantrum. The more we try to push through the more frustrated we get. And our brain will actually switch us over to instant gratification activities, not just because it wants to feel good, although that's part of it, but to actually preserve brain functioning. Because if we keep thinking too hard in that prefrontal cortex, we get a toxic level buildup of glutamate. And so our brains were actually created by God to solve new problems in new ways in the limbic part of our brain. And the prefrontal cortex was trained to turn off when we're basically like running up against a brick wall over and over again, trying to solve it in old ways instead of being that creative force we were made to be to innovate new solutions. So that's kind of like I geek out on some of the sciencey parts of it as well. But in that overthinking chapter, I also have a section called the princess and the pea problem. So right before that is the colossus of clout, which is we want to start something new, and our brains immediately list off the highest, biggest, best, most perfect version of that thing. We immediately get overwhelmed and shut down and go, well, it's never going to be that good, so I may as well not do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
If fear can't take us out on the extreme of the biggest, best, then it goes to the other extreme of the tiniest little detail. And it makes us get kind of hung up on like, well, which email should I use to send this? What color
Are you
should my
reading
logo
my
be?
mail right now?
have a
Because
camera
that is what I have stressed over in the last week.
Oh my gosh.
Literally
So funny.
switching my email address has stressed me to the max.
Princess and the Pea Problem, chapter
Yes.
7. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like you start to think through, like, I also jokingly call that the Dewey Cox problem, which is a movie called Walk Hard. It's a parody of Walk the Line. Dewey Cox has to think about his whole life before he goes on to the next stage, as we would say. And we start to think like, if I choose this, then it's like all these if then iterations, like a really horrible game of choose your own adventure, and it's all going to go wrong. A butterfly effect turned tsunami of worst case scenarios, and it happens to all of us. I had that when we were launching as photographers our lighting course. I got really like so tied up on like what the payment plan amount should be, and it's just now I can go, okay, this is fear in all of its boring ways, and it's the princess and the pea problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the faster I can give you a really unexpected visual metaphor that's easy to recall, because humans learn best from story and metaphor, the easier you're going to be able to snap your fingers and go, oh, right, fear's in the room. He's dressed like overthinking in the form of the princess and the pea problem. Mm-hmm. The faster you can do that, the faster all the power fear has in the room just sort of whooshes back out. He's still in the room. He's not really going anywhere, but he no longer has that power of sort of like being the scary, mysterious thing behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Because I think that is where most women have the hang up is they feel the fear and they give into that fear, and then that fear has power when we know in reality that we hold the tools to stop feeding the fear. And,
If I could add to that, I think like another version of that that's even trickier is when they feel the fear and they go, oh, so that must be a sign I shouldn't do it.
Oh, yes.
It's like, oh, I must be on the wrong track, or I wouldn't be questioning it so much. It's like I make the argument in the book, it's actually quite the opposite, because fear's not creative, but he is busy, so he's got to be productive, and he's only going to bother you if you're about to do work that matters. So you can actually use it to predict you're on the right track.
That's good.
That's good to know.
I'm feeling very secure about myself right now then.
That's good
Nice.
news.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Well, is there anything else from the book? If there's like kind of one takeaway, one thing that if the woman listening, why she should grab this book, like what's the kind of takeaway?
Yeah. So like I've been mentioning, like all the different chapters have really fun names. Chapter 11 is Failure is a Bankrupt Identity because it's chapter 11. Not about bankruptcy at all, and so
I know.
things like that. But chapter 10 is probably my favorite and the one that I struggle with the most, which is perfectionism is hiding with better PR. And
Mm,
it kind of makes the joke like, not since the Got Milk people has there been an ad campaign to make something so plain Jane vanilla seem so sexy and sought after
yeah,
as when Hiding did a glow up and a rebrand and try to convince everyone it was this better, more noble thing called perfectionism. Like, oh, I'm just such a perfectionist. Of course I can't hit send yet. Oh, I'm such a perfectionist. Of course I have to like tweak that a little bit more. And what we're not willing to say is I'm actually hiding because I'm afraid I'm not any good at it. I'm afraid I'll be disappointed. I'm afraid I'll be embarrassed. I'm afraid I'll fall flat on my face and everybody will be watching.
yeah.
And we can go on like that for years, thinking that if we're just perfect enough, then we'll never be hurt again. No one will ever leave us again. That perfect can keep us safe. And so, what I would say to somebody listening in closing is the voice in your head that would love for you to be afraid and to take it as a sign that you're not meant to do it. That voice is actually terrified of the day you finally realize that perfect records were never a prerequisite for purpose.
Mm,
And as we go back and check the transcript, we never asked you to be perfect. We asked you to show up,
yeah.
to show up and show up and show up again. Because what happens when you let fear win is another year goes by, the clock goes on ticking, and the world is worse for your absence because there was work that was uniquely prepared for you to uniquely do. And when you don't show up, the world is missing what you have to offer. So, perfect records, not a prerequisite for purpose. Show up anyway. Fear's not your friend. Start today, start anyway. And feel the fear and name the fear and move forward anyway.
I love
Oh,
that.
that's good.
Yep.
That is so good. I
So
mean,
good.
when we think about it in scripture, he says, good and faithful, not
Mhm.
perfect. And
Right.
Jesus was
Yes.
perfect. So he knows we're not. And I
Mhm.
love that. I love that perfect record doesn't indicate the purpose that we have, and we do have that purpose. And again, I go back to that verse. It's in our mentorship that we do with women. We take them through a year long, and one of our verses is that Ephesians 2:10, you are God's workmanship, created in
Yep.
Christ Jesus to do the good work that he has established in advance for you to step into.
Yeah.
And it is a beautiful thing when you get to witness women doing that. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's amazing. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, okay. So tell us if we are listening and we want to follow you, we want to find you, we want to find out more information about maybe inviting you to come speak or to grabbing your book Underestimated or Dirt
Yep.
or any of the stuff. Where are you? How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I want to tell your people about two fun things. One of them is in my second book, Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots. I introduced what are called the achiever types, these 5 achiever types, and they actually carry over into Underestimated for how the achiever types get stuck playing small and how they can move forward anyway. And so we have the performer who's always on their toes and needs to show both themselves, of course, but more so other people, or at least as importantly so, other people, how far they've come. The tightrope walker who could care less who is clapping, but they need higher and higher death-defying feats to feel the same amount of good. The masquerader is our master of sleight of hand, of shoving somebody else into the spotlight so they can shrink away into the shadows. The contortionist is the classic people pleaser. They contort, twist themselves down into a tiny little knot because it's easier than being criticized. And our illusionist in the distance who believes that both they themselves and all the conditions to begin must be perfect before they can even start. And so if you go to achieverquiz.com, we have put together a quiz for you where you can take it in about 2 minutes, 10 minutes if you overthink it. And the questions are super light and easy, but then in true Mary form, we're going to go deep with the results. I'll tell you why your type gets stuck playing small and how you move forward. Anyway, so that's achieverquiz.com or marymorantz.com/quiz. My last name is Marantz. And it's Marantz like dance. And then if you go to namethefear.com, we actually have for your people, the whole first chapter is up there for free. They can download and start reading today, get a feel for that visual writing that I have, the boulder rolling back down the mountain over and over again. And depending on when this comes out, if it's around launch day, if you go ahead and grab the book between now and the whole first launch week, from when the book comes out through the rest of that week, we're actually giving away the whole audiobook for free, which is huge. A lot of publishers will not do that, but mine is. And so it's kind of like getting 2 books for the price of one to highlight and underline, and one for me to read it to you sweetly at night or whenever in the car.
That's great.
Whatever.
And you read your own audiobook. I also
do.
Yeah.
Oh man, any author that reads their own audiobook, it's like I love audiobooks. I love it. And we'll include all those links in our show notes too. So we'll put all of those links in there. So if you're listening and you want that information, you just go to our show notes and you can click on those links.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, and I'm at Mary Marantz on Instagram. Go take the Achiever quiz and then come tell me what type you got. We can keep the conversation going over there. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so Mary, we end our podcast because we are Savor and we like to taste and see that the Lord is good and his name will be lifted. And we do that through food. So we always ask during our Savor moment, we usually share a recipe or something. So do you have something that you just love to cook, even if it's a stolen recipe or a simple recipe or a splendidly complex recipe? It does not matter for us. Okay. We take all recipes.
I got to tell you, this is the hardest question of the whole interview because in our home, my husband actually does all the cooking. I'm very, very lucky. I'm very, very lucky. But I'll give you 2 off the top of my head. One is I don't know if this even counts as a recipe, but we do have it for breakfast pretty much every morning. And that is we have like honey Greek yogurt with chopped bananas. And then this wild granola called Wild Grains granola that we get that's just like, I think it's actually, it's weird that it's called Wild Grains. I have to double check that. But it's like grain-free granola. So like a lot of, seeds and things in there that are just really delicious. And then sometimes we like swap that out for like a protein granola or whatever. Maybe a little honey drizzled on top, a little scoop of peanut butter perhaps. And it kind of feels like you're eating an ice cream sundae for breakfast is sort of what it boils down to. But it actually, because it has a lot of protein in it, it keeps you feeling full and ready for a big day to go, name the beer and move forward anyway. And then the other one that we just live on a lot that's really easy to make is a sausage kale soup. Ooh. So that's going to be saute some onions and some garlic, add in some chicken stock. In a separate pan, you're going to fry up some hot, spicy sausage. That's really important. If you don't have that, you can add some red pepper flakes, but I really like to start with this actually spicy sausage. Chopped potatoes, chopped sweet potatoes. You can add some chickpeas if you want to bulk it up a little bit more. That cooks for quite a while, and then at the very end, you shred up some kale and put it in. If you want to make it feel a little bit like a hearty meal, you can also do some rice, on the side and sort of put it over that so it's a little more like a stew. You can also then sprinkle on some Parmesan on top, like shredded Parmesan.
Yes, please.
Yes.
And it's just like sometimes I'll even put in a little bit of like lemon zest to give it a little bit more of a fresher sort of bite, I guess. And it's just really, it's like summer or winter. It's actually,
sounds really
it's very versatile soup.
Yes, that sounds amazing.
Like sweating over here. That's like the hardest question.
I know.
That part's
you did great.
Yeah, great job.
You gave us 2 great answers.
Good. True overachiever fashion.
That's right. That's it. I love it. Well, we are so glad that you took time out of your schedule to sit with us at the table today and to share with us. And we are so excited. Elizabeth and I both have already read Underestimated, and we are excited for the rest of the world to be able to access it. So
for sure.
Thank you so much for joining us at the table. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much for pulling up a chair to the table today. At Savor, we exist to help women find hope in Jesus through community, discipleship, and of course, sharing delicious recipes. For more information and other ways to connect with us, please check out savorministries.org. And we'd love it if you would write us a review or like and subscribe to the podcast so that our message can spread to many more women to bring hope and community in the name of Jesus. Get out there and savor his goodness.